Hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. In this video I want to talk about something that's not necessarily a typical homestead subject, but it does pertain to homesteading and modern homesteading for all of us, I believe. So the question is, as a homesteader, how important is it for you to try to maintain the property value of your homestead? So when you look at that and say, well, what do you mean? Well, if you had to sell your homestead tomorrow, what would be the hindrances or the benefits of being able to sell your piece of land? Well, your first response may be, well, Troy, I'm not planning on selling my homestead. The whole point in having a homestead is to stay on it for a long time and build it up and do all the things I want to do. So I'm not concerned about the property value, the resale value. I'm not trying to make money from my homestead. I want to have a simpler life or enjoy some natural things. I want to do that. That's my primary focus, not resale value. Well, I agree with all of that, and I appreciate all that, and that's even my attitude. I really don't plan on going anywhere, Lord willing. But there is something I think we all have to consider when we look at long-term plans or long-term goals with our property. Well, I don't mean to be depressing or even morbid, but if you think about it, what would force you to sell your homestead when you don't want to, sooner rather than later or before it's time? Well, obviously, an injury, an illness, death of either you or a spouse or a loved one that requires you to have to liquidate your assets, or you have to move to take care of somebody. So those are the type of unexpected things that could pop up. And when you look at that and say, well, okay, that kind of stuff can happen. Nobody knows when that's going to happen or if that's going to happen, so don't stress out over it. And I agree. We don't want to live a life of fear. We don't want to be in worry, oh, what's going to happen tomorrow? But there are some considerations, some seeds maybe that we should all have planted in our heads about looking at these type of things if indeed we had to sell off everything at some point quickly because circumstances change. So let's use my little slice of paradise here as an example. If I was going to put this 100 acres on the market tomorrow because one of those things happened and I had to sell it off, then the question would be, well, Troy, what's behind you? A half-finished barn, a workshop that looks like elves blew up in it, and of course, collectible things that I have around here that have potential future use. Are those assets or those liabilities? Well, if you look at it, if you're going to try to sell, in that situation, if I'm going to try to sell this property as quickly as possible because circumstances require me to move or to downsize, then most likely when I broadcast this to a broader market or a real estate market, these things are all going to be liabilities. Somebody's going to look at that and say, well, that looks like a fire hazard. That looks like something that needs to be pushed over with a bulldozer. They may not have the appreciation for something I've spent year after year hand building with wood from the property that I've milled and stuck up there by hand. That's not going to mean anything to them. If they don't have any use for a barn, they don't have animals or don't want to have animals, they just want a piece of property to do something else with, then that's going to be a liability. The same with some of these materials that I have around, these things that I think are going to be useful in the future, IBC totes, some old trailers, some old axles, whatever the case may be, a bunch of 55-gallon drums, those type of things. I'm going to have to get all of that off of there. I'm going to have to sell that off or haul it off to the dump, and that'd be a lot of time involved there. I remember an interesting circumstance when I built our house. For those of you that don't know the story behind our house, we built our house up on the ridge. We lived in the workshop for 2 years while we were preparing to build the house and getting it all figured out, getting the site prepped. But I became the general contractor on that project, and it took me over 2 years to build the house because I had, as a GC, I was doing scheduling people to come in and do stuff, but then other things, a lot of it I was doing myself that I felt confident to do. So I had the house under a construction loan, and the bank I was working with was a friend of the family's. It was just a really good opportunity for us, maybe too good an opportunity. The guy lent me way too much money, and like a dummy, I took it all. But when it was time to close that construction loan, that small bank didn't have a standard 30-year mortgage. I had to go out into the primary market to find that. Well, all the things I was doing on my own and things I thought will do at my own speed to my advantage were actually to a disadvantage for me. So I went out on the primary market. They looked and said, we don't have sidewalks. You got to have sidewalks before we'll close on your house. Your house isn't officially done until you have sidewalks. I'm like, holy moly, are you kidding me? And my creek crossing, the fact that you drive through a creek on my property to get to the house, like, you got to put a bridge in. And I'm like, I don't want a bridge. They're like, no, you got to put one in. Your house isn't done until you have a dry way to get to your house. And we went back and forth on that, and I actually won that argument. But there was a lot of issues there. And I thought, wow, man, when you look at how banks and institutions look at property, yeah, they have this cookie cutter process that most of us homesteaders don't fit in. They're not trying to consider, well, how do you do animals? How do you do sustainable stuff? How do you do off-grid? How are you doing your own water? How are you doing composting toilets? All that stuff is going to be an issue. So if you've taken the time and you've worked your butt off and you've got an off-grid house, you've got your own well, maybe you're drawing it by hand or solar, you don't have a septic system, maybe using composting toilets, or if you are, you've got a very small septic system, something like that in place, something that accommodates your lifestyle perfectly and is still environmentally sound, all those things. When you go to sell that, because of these unforeseen circumstances, you may get a lot of pushback from the primary market or people looking to buy a piece of land like that. Well, so then you may be asking, well, Troy, so what's the solution? What are you recommending? Well, I don't think there's a clear answer, but I think it's something we all need to think about and ruminate on that potential. When I look at my circumstance, I think, okay, what are the potentials there? Well, obviously, if I would have a debilitating injury, or I would be injured to the point of death, or keel over from a heart attack because I love bacon so much, then what's that mean for Kelly? Well, fortunately, I'm blessed to be able to afford a life insurance policy that would be decent, that she could really just walk away from this tomorrow, and she and the boys would be taken care of. If she wanted to try to sell this, it would allow her to take time to sell it and not just have to liquidate it because she's trying to make ends meet. So in that circumstance, we're like, okay, Kelly, I would recommend take your time to sell it. Maybe you can find a homesteader or somebody that has similar interests that say, well, that barn's not a liability. That, the guy kind of did some stuff I wouldn't do, but I'm going to take it and run with it. I want this property. I want the assets. It's got already electric fence in. It can handle pigs. It's got all that. So that would allow her time to find a potential buyer that could get the value out of it that we see in it, versus what the primary market says, well, wait a minute, all those liabilities, it actually should be worth way less. Well, what about if I was injured to the point that I couldn't work the property anymore? Well, again, in those situations, because I'm self-employed and my day job is a desk job, if I would lose the ability of my legs, even blindness, those type of things, then I think I could still work that out where I could generate enough income again to be able to cover my basic expenses until I could liquidate this property. What about the opposite? What if Kelly, something would happen to Kelly? Well, again, I have a policy for her. I'm the primary breadwinner. She's a homeschool mom, so it wouldn't be a loss of income there. So the boys and I would have to figure out what we want to do at that point if she passes, obviously, when the boys are still at home. Again, kind of a morbid subject, not something you like to think about. It's kind of like when you sit down to buy life insurance. Nobody wants to talk about life insurance because it's such a drag. I think, well, the only way anybody gets any money is if I'm dead. But I think it's very important to look at. What about some of these other circumstances, like if your folks would pass away or a family member would get sick and you'd have to go take care of them? Well, again, those are things that you just really can't plan for. Does that mean you sell off the homestead, or maybe you rent it out so somebody can come stay, at least maintain the property while you're taking care of that temporary situation, a loved one or an elderly family member that needs care? Well, maybe you bring that family member to your homestead and take care of them there as well. So when it comes along the lines of property value, I think probably the biggest nugget of information, or at least the thing that we should be thinking about, is what we determine valuable may not be valuable for the majority of people out there that would be looking to buy property. We need to find people of like mind, people that want to homestead, people that want to develop property, people that want to have more of a simple life or natural living, off-grid, sustainable type stuff. And the way you find that, obviously in marketing we call that a universe. That universe of people is much, much smaller than the large universe of everybody out there that could possibly buy your land. So if you look and say, well, our universe is much smaller, then you need to take the time to be able to target those people. So whatever the case may be, hopefully you've got yourself positioned in a situation where if you found that you had to sell your property quickly because of a death or an injury or those type of issues, then it doesn't have to be too quick that you just give away the farm, pardon the pun. That you have to take the first offer that comes down the pipe, that you can explore these things and say, well, no, we think it's worth more than this. We think there's value in that. So look at that, savings accounts, life insurance policies, or injury type policies that give you coverage while you're injured and can't work. So look at those type of things to at least have that safety net there that gives you some breathing room in case those circumstances come up. And maybe one last piece of advice in this is, if you're looking at property value, things that may keep your property value up or allow your property value to be boosted, is some of the common stuff that the general public looks for, like utilities. Maybe you're off-grid and you want to stay off-grid. That's great, but maybe you have the opportunity for power to be brought in. If it's set a pole and say, okay, here's the pole. If you're going to buy this land and you want to be on-grid, you don't want to be off-grid, we already had a power pole put in, and so all you got to do is have a meter base set, bang, you've got power. Same with water. If you've got public water access, public water comes within less than a mile of us, so it's not really an option. But if you had public water in the area and said, hey, we're at least going to go ahead and have a meter base put in, so if somebody looks at this property and say, hey, well, water's available, you may not want to use our well or the rain catchment or whatever you're using for off-grid water. And the same with sewer. If you're using composting toilets and those type of things, maybe you put a certified sewage system in, whether it's tied into a sewer if you have it in the area, or a full-blown septic system or aeration system or something like that, and say, yeah, we use composting toilets, but we don't choose to use these services, but they're there if we need them. Now again, that's a lot of money for those three things right there. So it's really one of those things that, to try to prepare for, to be prepared in that situation, it may not just be feasible to do financially. So I'd like to think somewhere down the road, when I get all my stuff finished and things are just working hunky-dory and this place looks so beautiful because it's a completed homestead, then I won't have to worry about property value, because nobody would ever question the value of this land because it's so pristine. Yeah. Maybe living in a dream world there. Well, when it comes to discussing property value to a potential buyer, maybe that's where now we, as homesteaders, start making a list of stuff that we feel are assets and explain why they're an asset. So if you get in front of a buyer and a buyer says, that barn looks like it's a death trap. Well, no, actually, here's what's going on with it. And maybe you have all this stuff written out. Maybe it's descriptions of what you have. So in case you do have to liquidate your property, then at least the potential buyer has the opportunity to see some of your vision. Well, again, not the most exciting topic, but it's been something that's been rolling around in my head. People ask me all the time, what do you think your homestead's worth? I have no clue. The house was appraised when we closed. We had to have that done. But, the house is just one element. There's the land, there's these other improvements, what I consider improvements. And appraisals these days don't really matter to anything. You could be appraised, and because the market's so weird, you could get way more, you could get way less. Well, again, I hope this sparks some conversation and discussion and thought for fellow homesteaders. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Comment below what you think about property value. I really like the feedback that you guys give. So if you think property value is not even something that's even on your radar screen when it comes to your homestead, let me know. Or if you have thought about it, what are some things that you've put in plan to help in case some of these situations that you hate to be involved in pop up and you have to liquidate quickly. Subscribe if you haven't, and check us out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Take care.